All right, here we are, Sunday, November 8th, 2020. Another edition of Random Thoughts from County Antrim. I'm your host, David McDonnell. I want to fill you in on a couple things going on in Antrim County. And if you're first to tune in, this is normally my half hour of stories, tidbits of historical interest. And some yarns, and some true stories, some not so true. And, of course, whatever it is that kind of comes in my random thoughts. Hence the name, Random Thoughts from County Antrim. Now, I want to fill you in on something that happened in County Antrim this week. We had a glitch in our voting. And County Antrim is my neck of the woods here in northern Michigan. And actually was not a voting glitch. Depending on who you believe, it was either a software error or it was a human error, in that our county clerk failed to update the vote counting software. And the result of that was that the unofficial reporting of votes in our county were wrong. Now, it's a small county. There's about 17,000 voters in County Antrim. That's out of about 5.5 million voters in the state of Michigan, and it's out of the 150 million votes cast nationally. So our votes don't mean all that much in the grand scheme of things. But Michigan was considered a swing state, and is a swing state, and so that every vote counts. Every vote has to be counted. Now, local officials here and everywhere are under great pressure to count the votes accurately and to count them quickly. And everybody was watching, again, particularly if you're in a swing state. So what happened in County Antrim? Well, the votes were cast. The ballots were run through the scanner, and then they were tabulated electronically. Now, that system for the official vote count was then followed by checks and rechecks and audits and everything else, all done within a week or so of the election. It's a week, 10-day process to go through and make sure everything on the official vote tally is accurate. And all the while, the paper ballots are kept tucked away, safe, so that if you have to, you can retabulate and even count by hand. But that's for the official results. For the unofficial results, the ones that are reported election day or within a few days after election day, from the local precincts to the county, and then from the county to the state, those are the ones that are then reported to the news media. Now, officials use an election management software. It kind of reads and aggregates the electronic tabulates and comes up with a result. Now, the company which created this software, one of the many companies, but the company that created the software used in County Antrim, issued a recent update to the software. And the county officials, for whatever reason, did not update the software. They didn't install the software update. Why? I don't know. But if it were me, I would know the reason. Because every software I own sends me notices of update. It has a little icon to click to update the software. And I rarely do. It seems to me whenever I install a computer software update on my computer gets worse. Almost invariably. All too often, the update has nothing to do with making your software run better or your computer run better. It's just a way for the software company to download more crap on your computer. And I never, ever install updates on my phone, because it always makes my phone worse. It's just not worth it. I only install updates if I'm absolutely convinced I have a problem and that the update would correct it. Now, I don't know if this is what happened in County Antrim. It may be that the clerk ignored it intentionally, may not have recognized the significance of the update, but she did not install the update. The result was when the software went through the tabulations, it came up with a number that were different from the actual tabulations. And what was the unofficial initial report from County Antrim? Is that it was that Joe Biden won County Antrim. Now, everybody who lives here and anybody who's ever been here knows that that's preposterous. It just wasn't going to happen. But the reporting of this unofficial results caused a huge stir, which is why I'm telling you the story. Republican officials in Michigan jumped on the story as proof that the election was being stolen and that there was fraud going on in the counting of votes. Now, what is more preposterous, I should say, than Biden winning Antrim County, was that there would be fraud in that direction from Antrim County. Every elected official in this county, every locally elected official in this county, is a Republican. And that is as it should be, because they win every local election. So a claim that any local official in our county committed fraud is just ludicrous. But that they would commit fraud in favor of Joe Biden is even more ludicrous. But it's a sad commentary that when something just goes awry, something's not quite right, something that in the ordinary course would be fixed, in fact was fixed, that some people just jump to conclusions and assume the worst. Sad commentary, to assume the worst in people. Now, the unofficial voting was corrected. Official tally is still a week or so away. It should come out midweek, statewide. Unofficially, Trump won 56% of the vote in this county. As a footnote, Trump received 62% of the vote in this county in 2016. So that's the glitch. But if you're like me, I spent most of the week with television news on. We kept our television on 24 hours a day. And I was so that, and all night long, and that was so if we got up in the middle of the night, we could just quickly check the results, or whether there was any change in the results, without having to look around for the remote control. And we kept it on all day, sort of as background, so we could rush in and take a peek if there were an update in the vote tally. And I think 24 hours a day, whatever this has been, 7 days now, I think our television overheated more than once. So there's a risk there. But we did it anyway. But more than anything else this week, I came out with a new respect, tremendous respect for our local election officials. The poll watchers, the poll workers, the vote counters. In between the updates on vote tallies, all the television networks, you had just these talking heads, just people babbling about this, babbling about that. And they were just filling in airtime until we got more reports on the real numbers. And every network had kind of fixed in the background, had a camera fixed on the vote tabulation areas of one community or another. Philadelphia was one of the hot spots, and obviously we got a lot of pictures of what was going on in the counting area in Philadelphia, but also Detroit and Atlanta, Phoenix, all over the country. We had these regular television broadcasts of what was going on in the rooms where they were counting the votes. And what the camera showed us is that there was just this army of people who were just doing their jobs very systematically, very laboriously, meticulously. They were just doing what they were supposed to do and count the votes. And it's hard, I think, sometimes to recognize people, ordinary people, doing their jobs, just doing their jobs. Hard to recognize them sometimes as heroes. But those folks really are heroes for doing their job in the face of a pandemic, in the face of all these charges and accusations of fraud and corruption. Here are people going to work every day, counting the votes as meticulously and as compliance with the rules as they could possibly do. Now, I've always had, and I'll put my editorial hat on here. I've always had a special place in my heart for teachers, and for nurses, and for other people who are just way underpaid, way overworked, and way underappreciated. And I'm just going to carve a little chunk on my heart, rearrange some things a little bit to make special room, more room, for people who handle our elections and handle it so well. Results are what the results are. I'm delighted some elections, I'm furious at others, but the people who handle our elections do it every single time and do it well, meticulously, professionally, every single time. And that just makes it, I just think it's brilliant. And I did something else this week besides vote and watch the elections. I participated in my first and only Irish festival in the year 2020. And of course it was virtual. The Irish Music Festival, hosted by the Galway Bay Irish Pub in Ocean Shores, Washington, put together their a virtual festival, and it was held yesterday. I think it was originally scheduled for October 30th, and for whatever reason got bumped. But it was all day yesterday, and it was delightful. Now, it was scheduled, I think, initially at 10 o'clock in the morning, Pacific time, extending into the early evening Pacific time, and it had some wonderful, wonderful performances by musicians, Irish American musicians, Celtic music musicians. Now, I never saw a schedule of the performance, who was doing what when. They asked me to submit a video, and I submitted them one where I told a story. But I never got a schedule that says when my story was going to be slotted on this virtual festival. Now, I rarely perform as the headline act. Most festivals, when you go to a festival, a typical outdoor festival, there's a large tent with a large stage and an elaborate sound system. And that is for the headline acts. And there's often at these festivals smaller tents, a smaller stage, smaller sound systems. And those are for the lesser known acts, and often equally talented, but lesser known, for them to perform their music in a smaller setting. Then you often have yet another tent, which is a much, much smaller tent, often without a stage at all. But it has a microphone and chairs and other, whatever else paraphernalia you need, but it's certainly not an elaborate sound system. And that is for the Storyteller. And I get it. Most people come to Irish festivals to hear the best bands. They want to hear the music, and they want to have beer, and that's what most people do, and they have fun doing it. So I don't expect, and I'm not at all begrudge those that have a higher billing than the Storyteller. But that's the way it goes. So I assumed when I started watching the festival, virtual festival yesterday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, which is 1 o'clock my time in the East, I assumed I'd be one of the first acts. They'd get rid of the Storyteller and you have the lead musicians later. So we watched 10 in the morning, and listened, enjoyed the music, enjoyed seeing old friends virtually. And they kept going. And we're getting to now their time. I don't know what it was their time, but our time it's 7 o'clock, 7:30 p.m., getting to the end of the festival. And all of a sudden, they introduced the last act. And it's me. I'm the one that gets the prime time viewing for the virtual Celtic Festival. I thought it was brilliant at first. But you may remember, if you can think back all the way to yesterday, there was something else going on in the world at the exact same time. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Eastern Daylight Savings Time, whatever the heck we are in. And what I'm talking about, of course, is the speeches given by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, which were both inspiring speeches, by the way, but they each gave a speech about the victory and what they're going to do, boom, 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 followed by this incredible fireworks display, and confetti was coming down from the sky. I don't know who dropped it, but it was floating down onto the parking lot of this convention center in Wilmington, Delaware, and this whole thing, after their speeches, turned into a big party. Wonderful display, just a very inspiring display, and even if you didn't care for the candidates, it still was a recognition of what a week we have come through, and maybe what a 4 years we've come through, but that's a different story. But the whole world, think about this, the whole world was faced with a choice, very, very dramatic choice. Do you watch Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in this celebration in Wilmington, Delaware, 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Savings Time here in the United States? 8 o'clock. Do you watch them, or do you watch David McDonnell, the American Shawnee, in participating in a virtual Irish festival in Ocean Shores, Washington? People chose. Now, I haven't checked any of the rating systems, but I do suspect that I lost that ratings war. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Maybe I'll run for president. Maybe I'll get higher ratings if I do that. Now, let me give you just a hint about how I do these podcasts, because I don't make these things up as I go along. I don't get in front of the camera and just start talking. I wish I had that gift, but I don't. But I also don't plan them weeks and weeks in advance. Typically what happens is I get an idea during the week, and I kind of play with it, and then I kind of expand on it, and it gives me a theme, and that leads to something, and it reminds me of a story, or sometimes it helps me create a story. And from there, I just build a podcast. Now, that happened to me this week. I got a great idea for a podcast on Monday, and it was almost like an inspiration. I kept thinking about it, and I kept building on it, and I kept adding to it and building it into a real theme, and I developed that into a real story. And I know it was going to be a good story. It just had all the elements of a good story, an inspirational, timeless, good story. And I thought that's what my podcast would be about today. And it was going to be one of my best stories. I just knew it. That was on Monday when I went through that whole process. Now, this is the problem. I don't remember what the idea was. I can't for the life of me remember what that story was all about. It completely escaped my brain. That brilliant idea that I had on Monday is out there somewhere, but it's just not in here. I don't remember it at all. I just lost it. And I even then thought about changing my podcast theme, that the theme would be about dementia. But if I did, I'm not sure I could remember it. But that would be yet another way to do it. And I have another clue about dementia, that maybe dementia is setting into this already wee brain of mine. I was in intense pain the other day, just intense. And it was very severe. And I'm still in pain today. I just don't remember where it is. And I hope I don't remember where it hurts, because then I think it will really hurt. But I don't know what I'm going to talk about. If I'm going to talk about dementia, I think I might develop a story about the American Shawnee, the Shawnee with dementia. I'm not sure where it'll go, but it might be an interesting story. But I do know what I'm going to talk about next week, and I got to write it down so I don't forget. And it's a series of true stories I want to tell. And let me give you the background for what made me think about that. Because I always find it intriguing that Americans, by and large, there's exceptions obviously, but Americans by and large take great pride when an immigrant or the son or daughter of an immigrant achieves success in America. That just helps us, reinforces who we think we are when an immigrant comes to America and either they or their son or daughter just succeed. We saw a bit of that last night with some inspiring comments by Kamala Harris, but we see that all the time, and it is indeed inspiring. But what I've often thought about is that the flip side of that is true in Ireland. With the diaspora of the Irish people during the Great Hunger and the years, decades, centuries before, and then decades since, Irish people have left the island. And there are now people with Irish descent all over the world. And for centuries and centuries, Ireland's number one export has been its people. And I think it's because of that. The people of Ireland just take great pride when one of its people, when one of its expatriates, when one of the descendants of one of the people who left Ireland, when one of those people achieve success, there's just great pride in Ireland. Many examples of that. I want to mention one because one I'm sure you never heard of, but it's a fascinating man called, his name was Guillermo Brown. He was born William Brown in County Mayo. He's considered the father of the Argentinian Navy. And there's statues of him all over Argentina and all over Ireland. And he is a fascinating guy. I think I'm going to make a whole podcast to him, or at least a blog entry about him, because he really is an interesting man. But what made me think about this is because we often think about it in terms of American presidents with roots in Ireland. And the first is, and I've talked about this at many festivals, many cultural events, and told some true stories about some of these, about the ancestors of some American presidents. And Andrew Jackson is probably the first. I visited his childhood home, his family home in Carrickfergus, which is in County Antrim. And John Kennedy, of course, had strong Irish roots, primarily from County Wexford. Ronald Reagan, while president, visited Ireland, and he visited his ancestral home in County Tipperary. Barack Obama also visited Ireland. Oh, Ronald Reagan, by the way, pronounced it in America over the centuries when the name spellings changed and were pronounced. It's pronounced here, pronounced by he and his family, as Reagan, Ronald Reagan. In Ireland, the name would have been pronounced differently. His ancestors would have pronounced their last name Regan or O'Regan. Now, Barack Obama visited Ireland while he was president, and his visit included a village in County Offaly. And that was the ancestral home of Falmouth Kieran. Now, Falmouth Kieran left Ireland in 1850 at the age of 19. And he had a family he had a child who got married, and boom, you go back down a couple more generations, you have Barack Obama's mother. So yet another president with Irish roots. And there are actually several others. There's references to others. I think the ones I told you are the presidents with the strongest DNA roots to Ireland. So I think I'm going to try to put some stories together about each of them and make that a podcast, because they're interesting stories when you look at what people went through and what they did and where they went and what their migration was and how they evolved and what their children did and what their children did. And after doing that, you got a president of the United States. Now, what we have to do is add Joe Biden to that list. There's already a mural with Joe Biden's likeness on it in Ballina, County Mayo. Ballina is one of my favorite cities in Ireland. Beautiful city in the west of Ireland. And there's some Irish roots on Joe Biden's father's side, but most of it's from his mother's. His mother's maiden name was Finnegan. Maybe I'll tell you all you need to know. Virtually 100% of his mother's side of the family is Irish. But I think if we piece together the stories of those Irish immigrants coming to America and what they did and how eventually led to, after a generation or two, a president of the United States, I think it might be an interesting story. So I think that's what I'm going to do for you next week. Now, I do want to do a commercial before I wrap things up. And my sponsor today is a small organization in Michigan, in Washtenaw County, Michigan, around Ann Arbor, called Move Me Brightly. And the principal of that company is a nurse who works in the pediatric oncology department, kids with cancer. And she started making, as a sideline, head coverings for kids who lost their hair due to chemotherapy. And she expanded from that to making also headbands, just wonderful decorative headbands. And she makes them out of recycled materials. She finds stretchy materials with different prints on them, either plain color or different prints, and she puts them together to make a headband or head covering. And most recently she went into, once the pandemic hit, started to make face coverings, masks, the kind of masks we should all be wearing. And I grabbed a couple of them here. This one is put this up so you can see it. This one's blue. Nice rigid top so you can put it around your nose and it stays. Nice stretchy stuff around the ears. She makes some with buttons so they hold onto your ears quite well. They're meant to be worn over your face and mouth, and not as chin diapers, which you see so many people wear, which don't do a damn bit of good. As I said, this one was blue, plain solid color, but she gets whatever she can find material for, she'll make them. This one, I bought this one because I'm a Michigan guy, and this one was some material she got that has the Michigan Block M on them. You don't have to be a Michigan guy and get anything you want. If you can find the print, she'll make them. And she just grabs whatever material she can find at a resale shop, and she makes headbands, head coverings for children who lost their hair, or anybody who's lost their hair, and of course masks. They're inexpensive. You can find her site on Facebook called Move Me Brightly, MOVE, Move Me Brightly. And if you're a deadhead, you know where that name comes from. She is a deadhead. She also operates a buy one, give one promotion. If you buy one of these, she'll make two, and she'll give one to one of her cancer patients. So please take a look at her Facebook site, Move Me Brightly. Buy a face mask, buy a head covering, buy a headband. Not only will you help her, you'll help the patients, cancer patients, and you'll help me, because this is my sponsor. So that's the end of the podcast today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for helping me get through this difficult week trying to plan this podcast. We all got through a difficult week, but it's been brilliant. Please take a look at my website, clandonald.net. Email me at clandonald@gmail.com. Take a look at my website while you're at it. My Facebook site while you're at it. It's just plug in Clandonald, spelled this way, in the Facebook search box, and take a look at my books, Clandonald and By the Horse and Guinness, and then join me next Sunday at 6 o'clock for the next installment of Random Thoughts from County Antrim. And of course, stay safe, stay smart, and do the right thing. Thank you and goodbye.